I'm Lee C. Camp, and this is No Small Endeavor, exploring what it means to live a good life.
If you're taking moonshots, your audacity needs to be through the roof. Because if it's not, you won't start on the kinds of crazy, unlikely journeys that just might change the world.
That's Astro Teller, co-founder of Alphabet's Moonshot Factory, which develops sci-fi-like technologies to help solve some of the world's most pressing problems.
You will be wrong almost all the time. There is no way to avoid that. That's just not how innovation works.
We discuss how failure drives progress, why Astro does not take himself too overly seriously, and his take on the meaning of life.
You need to give yourself to the game and imbue it with meaning.
All coming right up. You know, we pour our hearts into No Small Endeavor, crafting conversations that inspire, challenge, and make you think a little deeper. But here's the thing. Behind every great podcast is a great production team. And that's why we trust Great Feeling Studios. They don't just produce No Small Endeavor, they create award-winning podcasts that help nonprofits and brands turn big ideas into powerful professional shows. So, if you're ready to make a podcast, not just any podcast, but one that truly amplifies your impact, visit helpmemakeapodcast.com. Because great stories move people, and moved people change the world. That's helpmemakeapodcast.com. I am not big into fads. I prefer stuff that works, which reminds me of Quince, where I've gotten some summer attire that fits right, feels good, and lasts. That's gotten my lovely wife Laura also shopping at Quince, and she likes my Quince linen shorts and my really good-looking new Quince summer linen shirt. Quince has the kind of stuff you'll actually wear on repeat. I'm wearing mine on repeat, like breathable flow knit polos, crisp cotton shirts, and comfortable lightweight pants that somehow work for both weekend hangs and dressed up dinners. The best part? Everything with Quince is half the cost of similar brands. And Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. Stick to the staples that last with elevated essentials from Quince. Go to quince.com/endeavor for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/endeavor to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/endeavor. No Small Endeavor is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states. I'm Lee C. Camp. This is No Small Endeavor, exploring what it means to live a good life. Our guest today is Astro Teller. Astro's title is Captain of Moonshots at Alphabet's Moonshot Factory. There he's led radical innovation efforts for the past 15 years. Under his leadership, the Moonshot Factory has incubated breakthrough technologies aimed at solving some of the world's biggest problems. A computer scientist with a PhD in AI from Carnegie Mellon, Astro has founded multiple companies, authored books, and holds numerous patents in both software and hardware. He also hosts the Moonshot podcast, diving into the real stories behind audacious innovation. Astro and I had a fascinating conversation. I found myself challenged and inspired on the one hand, and wondering, even concerned on the other. Listen to the end, and you'll get my take on the conversation. Here's our fascinating conversation with Astro Teller. Welcome, Astro.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to this.
Very pleased to get to have you with us, and I've been looking forward to it as well. Fascinated with all of the remarkable kind of work that you all are doing. So let's talk first about maybe a brief introduction to X, the Moonshot Factory. And by X, we don't mean X formerly known as Twitter, but X founded by Google to do these audacious sorts of innovations, looking at some of the world's largest problems, but kind of give us a big picture description of what you all are seeking to do.
So X, which was formerly known as Google X, was set up about 15 years ago. I helped to set it up for Alphabet. Alphabet was an idea at the time, but hadn't been named yet. Alphabet is the holding company, the sort of parent. Google is the largest thing inside of Alphabet, but there are lots of other things within Alphabet, and X is one of them. X was set up, the Moonshot factory, as a way for Alphabet to get a lot of new surface area with the world, to go find new important problems for Alphabet to work on and hopefully some solutions to those. So we focus on taking moonshots. We would describe a moonshot as having three basic components. In order for it to be a moonshot, at least here at X, we would say there has to be a huge problem with the world that you want to solve. 2, there has to be some kind of science fiction sounding product or service that you can describe. However unlikely it is that we could actually make it, we could agree ahead of time that if we made it, it would very likely solve that huge problem with the world. And then 3rd, there has to be some kind of breakthrough technology that gets us at least a chance, even a small chance, of being able to make that science fiction sounding product or service so that we can resolve that huge problem with the world. If we have those 3 things, we at least have a moonshot story hypothesis. That doesn't mean it's super likely to work, but it means that we can go test it. So we high-five each other because we have an idea that has the right form. And then if you work at X, we would say like, oh, that's awesome. Now, how fast can we kill that idea? Because by definition, the sort of inherent physics of innovation is if you are trying to do particularly audacious things, you will be wrong almost all the time. There is no way to avoid that. And the people who pretend that they were right from the beginning, that they're super geniuses, like that's just not how innovation works. You have to be wrong most of the time. And so innovation is really easy if you don't care about efficiency. You just take lots of money and throw it at high energy people and you'll get some innovation. But that's not efficient, and which is why people don't do that very much. If you want to do it efficiently, that's the tricky part. And that's the reason that we describe what we do as the moonshot factory, because we're obsessed with taking these moonshots, and ultimately we want some of them to be successful and to end up as enduring businesses that can release this goodness to the world that we aspire to make. But we also want to do it efficiently. We're trying to systematize the process. And so the last 15 years of X has been this story where we started with a pretty chaotic environment, but there was definitely some magic here. And we're constantly trying to turn up the rigor dials without killing off the magic.
You have on your website a lot of the projects that are currently being incubated and other projects that have graduated and gone on to become a manifest thing in the world. But let's talk about maybe a couple of those to give some examples. 280 Earth I found particularly fascinating. Could you describe that one to us?
People have been working for quite a while on ways that you could grab carbon dioxide from the air. The reason that the Earth is warming is because we're putting more and more carbon dioxide into the air, other greenhouse gases as well, like methane, but the primary problem is CO2, carbon dioxide. And as we put more and more of it in the air, it creates the so-called greenhouse effect. The sunlight comes into the Earth, but the heat can't get back out again. It's like I'm putting a blanket over the Earth. So there's lots of talk about using energy that creates less CO2, stop burning dinosaur juice, using the energy we use more efficiently, like LED lights. But the third leg of that stool is we're going to have to find a way to run climate change in reverse to some extent if humanity is going to make it. That means we need to find ways to take the CO2 that's in the atmosphere, that's in the air, and pull it back out again and stick it under the ground so that it stops creating this sort of blanket over the Earth. And how to do that is known. That's not particularly the hard part, but doing it cheaply enough that you could make a profit doing it, that people would pay you to do that. That is a very unsolved problem. And 280 Earth has come up with a way of grabbing CO2 from the atmosphere that we believe is going to turn out to be much cheaper than other ways of doing it, which we think in the end can lead it to be an enduring business that helps humanity sort of build resilience.
Project Chorus was another one that especially caught my attention, radically improving how we make, move, and manage the world's goods, and that you're seeking to deal with staggering waste. Some of those numbers were indeed staggering. So maybe a brief description of that one.
Sure. So first of all, humanity makes, sort of depending on what you count as manufacturing, several $trillion a year, even if you leave aside things that are made in vats. There's several $trillion a year of stuff like hardware, like this laptop I'm in front of, that we make every year as humanity. And we are laughably inefficient at how we make it, how much of it we make, how we move it around. I can give you an example or two. Let's say within a hospital, people will buy more of various equipment than they actually need because it's just so hard to find something that's ready to be used. Let's say a X-ray machine on wheels. They just don't know where it is. So they buy more than they need and they just leave it around the hospital. They just kind of like pens in your house. You just keep buying them until you're finding them at the same rate that you're losing them. That is not efficient. If you could know where it was inside the hospital, then you wouldn't have to buy more. Or in that same hospital, if Medtronic is making stents that go inside the heart, and you have to have them in the hospital because if you're doing a cardiac procedure and you want to put one of those inside of a person to keep their arteries open, then how many you've got in the closet really matters. So once every 2 weeks, someone goes into the closet and writes down 1, 2, 3, 4. They count them up and they write it down on a clipboard. That is not the best humanity can do. These things sitting in that closet should be able to just shout out to the cloud, "Here, I'm in here, count me," so that they're automatically counted. So the hospital knows when they need to order more. The company that made them knows to send them more. None of this is automated right now. And the fundamental reason is because there are sort of tracking devices, kind of think of it as like Apple AirTags, but they're way too expensive. You can't put that on every can of Coke in the world, even every case of Coke in the world, to know where things are. And you have to find a way, if you really want to track all of the physical stuff in the world in real time and know some state about it, you can't create a lot of billions of dollars of physical infrastructure that's going to need to be set up to sense these little tags as they go through the world. So what Chorus has spent the last 6 years doing, very successfully now it turns out, is getting to the place where they can just have a sticker. They literally have a sticker. You slap it onto something and it talks to the rest of the world. And it says, here I am. Here's where I've been. Here's what my state is. Things like my temperature, whether the box I'm on has been opened recently, all those kinds of things that then allows for the whole of supply chain and logistics to start to get reorchestrated, which can save, on the order of $1 trillion a year if done right. And there's a huge amount of carbon footprint associated with all that waste that can be removed.
Yeah, it's just fascinating. And the numbers that point to that, a picture of that staggering waste. You say that every year, 20 cents of every dollar spent on manufacturing is wasted, $50 billion worth of cargo is lost, and 1.3 billion tons of food is wasted or lost, while more than 800 million people go hungry. It's fascinating, just fascinating. What would you say have been habits and traits that have been most important to you? Maybe going back to your childhood, what would you identify as that's a habit, that's a trait that I had, or that was taught to me that has been very important in the development of my life?
I'd probably call out two things. The first one is I grew up in a very hyper-intellectual household. My mother's father won a Nobel Prize in economics. My father's father was Edward Teller. So even by normal hyper-intellectual households, this was sort of extreme.
If you don't recognize the name of Astro's paternal grandfather, Edward Teller, he was a theoretical physicist and a contemporary of Einstein, who is most well known as the father of the hydrogen bomb.
And so in this context in which smartness was all that mattered, I had already lost by the time I was 7 or 8 years old. And that was difficult for me. But I think it was also really good for me because it made me start thinking from an early age about what other muscles besides kind of pure intellect, abstract reasoning, mathematics, those were the fronts on which I was going to lose. But there are lots of other ways to be smart and to sort of use your brain in interesting ways. And so from a young age, I worked hard to sort of build out a much more three-dimensional set of skills, I think, than maybe some hyper bright people do. And I think that served me very well. So I think of myself as being kind of a B plus, but across a very broad set of skills rather than an A plus at anything in particular. The other one, which is somewhat related, is I had this epiphany when I was about 20, 21 years old. I was feeling crushed under the weight of these expectations from my family about how much I should accomplish. And that just wasn't working for me. I was really stressed. And so I made a deal with myself, which is I was going to stop holding myself to the bar of how good I was, how much accomplishment I was going to sort of ring the bell on accomplishments over and over again. And instead going to hold myself to the standard of being a learning machine, of how curious I could show up and how much I was improving at whatever it is I was working on. And by shifting my focus from I'm proud of myself because I won to I'm proud of myself because I learned, because I'm curious, because I'm improving, I think my life has both been way more fun and probably more successful as a result.
What did that look like at that point at which you felt this kind of crushing weight of expectation and you finally yielded to a different way to frame thinking about your life?
Yeah, I was having breathing problems. I was hyperventilating a lot, and I was having some stomach trouble. And so I was meeting with my doctor at age 20, 21, and he said, you're going to be dead by the time you're 50 if you go on like this. It really got through to me. I was like, okay, I am taking life too seriously, and I'm showing up for myself in a way that's not going to scale. And I just moved it like the needle from, did I get it done? Did I win? To how well did I show up today? And I have control over how well I show up. So I get to end every day. It's still a high bar. I push myself hard, but I push myself very differently than I used to. I push myself to be a good human being, to always be interested in the people around me, in their ideas, and not just my own ideas. And it turns out being that way is more fun and it's more successful, at least in the long run.
You're listening to No Small Endeavor and a conversation with entrepreneur, inventor, and co-founder of Alphabet's Moonshot Factory, Astro Teller. I love hearing from you. Tell us what you're reading, who you're paying attention to, or send us feedback about today's episode. You can reach me at lee@nosmallendeavor.com. We would be most appreciative if you'd go to your favorite podcast app and write up a glowing 5-star review of No Small Endeavor. Those reviews help extend the reach of the beauty, truth, and goodness we are seeking to sow in the world. Coming up, Astro and I discuss cultivating vulnerability in the workplace, embracing failure, and the skills required to solve some of the world's biggest problems. Hey friend, if you didn't know, I started a newsletter a while back that comes out every 2 weeks. I've been delighted to hear from so many of you about positive response to the newsletter. We call it the No Small Endeavor Notebook, where I riff on themes and topics related to our podcast, giving you additional material for thinking and doing in your own quest to make sense of what it might mean to live a good life. Join us by going now to nosmallendeavor.com and sign up there. Again, go to nosmallendeavor.com to sign up now for our free No Small Endeavor Notebook newsletter. This week, one of my colleagues was asking about how I was liking cassava, and I replied, very much. She knew I had an extra stock at hand and asked if there were any way she could try some, and I said, no, I like it too much, so much so that it engendered my selfishness. I'm serious. I look forward to the occasions I get to enjoy my cassava whole body meal shake, and beneath the great taste is great stuff, keeping body and mind nourished all day. I continue to be especially pleased that every serving has 25 grams of plant protein, and that with every 2 scoops of cassava you get 85 plus superfoods, nutrients, and plant-based ingredients. I typically use it as a meal replacement or a mid-afternoon boost before heading to the YMCA for a workout. You can try cassava risk-free with their Love It guarantee. Fuel your day with cassava. Go to cassava.com and use code ENDEAVOR for 15% off your next order. That's cassava, code Endeavor for 15% off. Now, if they could just make a shake for the soul to make me less selfish. Thrive Market is the #1 destination for parents looking for healthy, stress-free grocery shopping for the whole family. It's like your favorite health food store, but online and way more affordable. There is one problem, though, that their little confetti cookie snack packs are so good. That is, my lovely wife Laura was just telling me how much she loved them, to which our oldest son began grumbling that his mother would not share them with him. But there you have it. That's the problem with such great, tasty, healthy options delivered fresh to your door from Thrive. They carry premium trusted brands that are up to 30% less than what you'd pay at traditional stores, and everything they sell is non-GMO and meets incredibly high standards. Take care of your health and your wallet. Thrive Market's biggest sale of the summer is officially on. For a limited time, go to thrivemarket.com/endeavor to get 30% off your first order, an extra 25% off thousands of summer essentials, plus a free $60 gift just for signing up. That's thrivemarket.com/endeavor to claim the offer before it's gone. thrivemarket.com/endeavor. So let's talk a little bit more about the moonshot thinking. In an article you wrote commemorating the 10th anniversary of X, you said, "I've come to realize that our main cultural battle is against fear and the strong gravitational pull toward conventional ways of thinking and behaving. All of us have been conditioned for years not to fail, not to be vulnerable, and to minimize risk." Very helpful, provocative. So to unpack some of that for us.
I think the provocative thing is what to do about it. We all have a big pile of fears we carry around on our back. What we're going to think of ourselves, what our spouse will think of us, what our peers will think of us, what our kids will think of us, what history will think of us. Super not helpful, but that's a monkey that's on pretty much everybody's back. The question is, how do you help people put those fears down? How do you help them at least create a microcosm where for some period of time or in some context, they could feel a little bit freed from the gravitational force of conventionality, let's say. So, for example, here at X, we are specifically asking them to do that. So, in other words, if you work at X, part of you being safe in the sense of like your job persists, is you need to be unconventional. Conventionality, well, the safe thing to do everywhere else is not the safe thing to do here at X. And there's lots of ways in which we help people feel that. So we can hijack your desire for safety, but put it into this new context.
What are ways, if you find yourself stuck or you find some of your peers, they find themselves in a place of being stuck, what would be some sort of practical advice you'd give on getting unstuck and cultivating anew that creativity that's latent within us?
You can't solve it just with external trappings, but I'm literally wearing a Phoenix hoodie and I have wheels on my feet right now, rollerblades, which I wear every single day. Do wearing rollerblades make you creative? No. But doing things that are silly, doing things that could otherwise invite some teasing or embarrassment creates a sort of daily practice to not worry about those things. If you work at X, I don't need you to wear a hoodie with a phoenix on it, but what are you going to do? How are you showing up silly? How are you showing up sort of relaxed and open? At least trying vulnerability on for size, and then that silliness and that open, that's actually the raw material for the creativity.
Would you count that invitation to silliness, this sort of call to vulnerability, that one of your top 5 commitments at X?
There's a poster taped up outside my door, which has sort of my baseline commitments. And I think the word vulnerability is not there, but humility is, a growth mindset is, being open to being wrong, being curious and excited about other people's thoughts, never using fear as a mechanism for creating order. Those are the things that are on the poster. And I think if you do those things, vulnerability has a lot more space to breathe.
How's that worked for you in the kind of high level of the tech world to call upon your peers to practice humility? Or maybe as another kind of way to put it is, what has that looked like institutionalized for you all there?
I mean, here's part of why I think it's so important. I mean, aside from generally, I think we're good people if we don't take ourselves too seriously. I'd rather hang out with people who are more like that. I bet you would too. But there's something more specific that really matters here. If you're taking moonshots, your audacity needs to be through the roof. Because if it's not, you won't start on the kinds of crazy, unlikely journeys that just might change the world. Silicon Valley generally has a pretty good audacity meter. I would like to think X's is particularly high, but that's not that unusual. But as soon as you do that, you're going to be wrong. We're going to be wrong 99% of the time. And so if you start on some journey, flying cars, the teleporter, whatever it is that you're going to do in your first year here at X, if you believe that you're right, you will take us ruinously far down that journey, and we will only find out many dollars and many years from now that you were wrong. We can only afford to take moonshots because we stop them early when they're not working. And not only stop them early, but I want you not to be in the mindset of, I've got to make the teleporter work. That would be a horrendous idea for you to have, especially in the first 2 or 3 years, since the chances are way less than 50% that it will work. I need you to have the attitude, why won't this work? I'm going to pressure test this to find out where it breaks. That activity can't happen without having humility that is as high as the audacity. If the humility is low, then you get what happens in most of the rest of Silicon Valley, which is someone says, I know the future, it's whatever they say, flying cars. And then they go ruinously far down the journey. And of course, 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000 are right, and a lot of news gravitates to them. But as a basket, that class of investments, venture capital as a class of investments, doesn't make money. It's just gambling. I know it's not a very popular thing to say, but that's why the humility has to be as high as the audacity. And you have to be hungry to discover you're wrong.
When you think about the meaning of your life, do you have a kind of coherent philosophy of meaning of your life, or some of these things that you've just been describing kind of central to your thinking about the meaning of your life?
I don't think there's any inherent meaning in life. I've had a lot of epiphanies in my life. I was standing on the side of a soccer field. I was maybe 10 years old. I was feeling really nervous about the game we were about to play. And then I thought, why am I nervous? It's just a game. It doesn't matter. And then I thought, oh God, all of life is like that. And then I thought about the game of soccer I was about to go play. I mean, I could not be stressed, I guess, by just thinking over and over again, this doesn't matter, but I'm not going to have a very good time playing the game if that's like what's going on in my head. You need to give yourself to the game and imbue it with meaning, and then take on some of the stress that comes with that in order to have a good time playing the game. And I believe life is like that too, where you choose to imbue it with meaning. I have chosen to imbue it with meaning so I can enjoy it. I want to be a good person. I want to find ways to be able to spend my time with people who I value and try to, leave the world a little bit better than I found it. Like put some positive ripples out into the world. That's what gives my life meaning, is having fun, growing as a person, supporting the people around me, and trying to have some net positive benefit in the world.
How have you thought about defining what a positive ripple is if your fundamental commitment there is no meaning as such other than what you imbue with meaning?
One of the principles that we have here at X is we are only fishing for Moonshots at the intersection of purpose and profit. That's an axiom. I can't prove that that's better, but that's better for us. That's what we're going to do. I feel really good about that. And I think everybody at X does. But I'm not going to prejudge what is a huge problem with the world. I would say, tell me a story. What is it you want to work on? And if that story isn't good enough, or even worse, if it's really just like moving money from one person's pocket to another, that's just not our jam.
So when you say you're working at the intersection of purpose and profits, do you have some sort of a working definition of purpose, or does that relate more to the invitation to be told a story?
Yeah, like I said, sometimes, like the chorus example we were talking about earlier, is that sort of sexy, like handing stew to a starving person kind of sexy? No. Is it actually helping humanity sort of be better at sort of getting on in life and using the world's resources more efficiently? Yeah, massively. So I feel really good about that. We just graduated a project. I'll give you something in a very different category. It's now an independent company. It's called Tara. It has a box a little bit smaller than a traffic light. It's called a light bridge, and it shoots light up to 20 kilometers. It has to be able to see another one of these boxes. You just strap these two boxes up to 20 kilometers apart on two different poles or sides of buildings or whatever. And then they send 20 gigabits per second, the same thing you would get in a fiber optic cable, only you don't have to trench the fiber optic cable. You can put it up in an hour for a microscopic fraction of trenching the fiber or even hanging it across poles. And so if you have some village in Ghana, in 1 hour, boom, all of a sudden, 20 gigabits per second broadband, where before they had like 3G. So super technical project, but can we squint at that and be like, is that good for the world? Of course, the internet is not perfect. There are dark parts to the internet, but on balance, bringing connectivity to parts of the world that had little or none of it before, we can feel really good about that.
I want to ask a follow-up question to this, but would you talk first about how the notion of 10x has been important for you all, and how solving a 10x issue is much more different and maybe easier even than a 10% improvement?
If I ask you, let's say, to make a car run on a gallon of gasoline for 50 miles, maybe you could do it, but man, you'd have to be smart. And you would inevitably try to take what everyone else has done and then be a little smarter than them. Wow. Given how many smart people have already worked on cars, that's hard. But if I told you you had to make a car run on a gallon of gas for 500 miles, you would know instantly and intuitively that that was impossible, starting from where everyone else had done things. If it was possible at all, you'd have to start over. You would have to bring bravery and creativity and a complete rejection of conformity and sort of best practices. All that would have to be out the window in order for you to have any chance of finding something that actually accomplished that. That immediate feeling that you have, that's the feeling we want everyone at X to have all the time. We call it looking for these Gordian knot chop moments. You know the story of Alexander the Great. There's a big knot in front of a temple. He was heading off into Asia to conquer Asia. There was a legend that whoever figured out how to untie this big snarled rope knot in front of this temple would conquer Asia. And so he walked up to the knot and he took out his sword and he chopped it in half, which is cheating. But it was also brilliant because it was a very militaristic thing to do. He reimagined the game. He rejected the game on the terms that everyone else had understood it. And that same ability we try to bring to every problem we find. How can we have a perspective shift such that this problem gets a lot easier? And when you ask for things to be 10 times better and not just 10% better, it immediately moves people into this different mode of looking for these qualitative changes, not just quantitative improvements in how to solve the problem. Like, Waymo, the self-driving car company, which came from X, that wasn't just making a slightly better car. It was totally rethinking how cars work. Or Wing, the drones for package delivery, which also came from X. Having Harry Potter Owl Post as your way to have things just appear to you wherever you are, whenever you want them, that's not like a get delivery to work marginally better. It's a kind of redo on how we think about what you even keep with you if you could just have anything you want show up whenever you need it. So those are examples of real qualitative 10x kinds of thinking and not just 10% kind of improvements.
As I've been getting ready to have this conversation, I found myself kind of a number of times thinking about Wendell Berry. He's also a poet and a novelist and an essay writer. And he's been quite influential in both the literary world and also in critiques of technology. One of the things that he has said is that in the Western world, we have this obsession with scale and speed. And that kind of obsession with global, big, gigantic solutions with scale and speed might do more harm than good, or creates more harm than good. And that he would then say the real work that we have to do as human beings is slow, local, relational, rooted in attention rather than technical ambition. And so I'm just wondering, if Wendell Berry were to say something like that to you, what immediately strikes you? How would you say you might agree with that, and how would you say you might disagree with that?
I would say this is an opportunity for an and, not an or. Come on, Wendell, you're right, and the things that we're doing are helping. Do I agree that there's a lot about the world that is slow, that is personal, that is local, that is deeply human? Of course I do. Is that a rejection of toothpaste, vaccines, the wheel, the lever, the printing press, computers? Like, come on. Like, humanity's longest lever for improvement in solving its problems is technology. I don't think it's like seriously credible to argue that technology doesn't have an important place in helping humanity continue to sort of up level and be a better version of itself, to have more goodness for everybody on the planet than we currently do. That's not a rejection of Wendell's perspective. I just think there's room for both.
You're listening to No Small Endeavor and our episode with entrepreneur, inventor, and co-founder of Alphabet's Moonshot factory, Astro Teller. If you've missed a portion of this interview or would like to have access to the complete unabridged version, you can follow our podcast wherever you listen. Coming up is a short break, followed by the ethical considerations of moonshot projects, the danger of unintended consequences, and Astro's philosophy on the meaning of life. If you, like me, find yourself fascinated, sometimes unsettled by the ways fear and faith intersect in American life, let me recommend a podcast I think you'll appreciate. It's called Devil and the Deep Blue Sea. It's a deeply reported series that dives headfirst into the satanic panic of the 1980s and 90s, a time when politics, religious fervor, and flawed memory converged, and the results sent innocent people to prison, tore apart communities, and shaped a generation's understanding of evil. What makes this podcast compelling is not just the history, but it's the lens through which it's told. The hosts ask hard questions about how pastors, therapists, and law enforcement got swept up in a moral panic and what it means for us today. Devil and the Deep Blue Sea is a production of Christianity Today. All episodes are available to binge listen right now, so don't miss out. Listen to Devil and the Deep Blue Sea wherever you get your podcasts.
When you hear Lululemon, you probably think of Align yoga pants, weightlessly soft, like you're wearing next to nothing. That's why you see them in class, at the grocery store, and in the park. But did you know about skirts with built-in liner shorts so you can still jump for the Frisbee? And tanks and bodysuits? With Align's iconic stretch, you won't want to take it off. And with endless style options, you don't have to. Shop in-store or online at lululemon.com.
Here on No Small Endeavor, we explore what it means to live a good life with the help of impassioned guests like public theologian Dr. Russell Moore. At Christianity Today, Russell heads up the Public Theology Project as editor-in-chief and hosts the popular podcast The Russell Moore Show, and has twice been a guest on No Small Endeavor. On The Russell Moore Show, Russell hosts the likes of Pulitzer Prize-winning author Marilyn Robinson, musician Andrew Peterson, and former Governor John Kasich, along with other authors, artists, and politicians doing good work in the world, looking for signposts of the work of God in troubling times. So make The Russell Moore Show part of your weekly listening routine. Follow and listen to The Russell Moore Show wherever you get your podcasts. With the attention economy, that phrase that so many have used to talk about this new world in which we find ourselves in which there are so many scrambling to get our attention, and that attention is in effect the sort of root economic pursuit, because that can be translated into sales. When you work with a massive company like Alphabet, and with the largest entity in Alphabet being Google, what does it mean for you to trade on human attention? Or is that even part of y'all's work with X? But given this sort of critique that some people make of using an attention economy to get people to buy things maybe that they simply don't need, how does that factor at all into the work that you all are doing?
Mostly not at all. We're a sister company to Google, and very explicitly, our job is not to help Google do their job, but to go find problems that Google isn't working on and go work on those. But if you worked at X and you were interested in this problem, I would say, great. How are we going to help? What could we invent that might make the world better on this front? I'm open. And again, you would need to make that argument to me. But generally, while we certainly say hi to our Google brethren, and we find things sometimes to do where their tools and our tools have something to say to each other, normally, the things that we're doing are very far afield. One of the ones that we've been public about more recently, just to give you another sense, but also to give your listeners a sense of how far afield, we're really interested in the fact that humanity makes about, as I was saying, $5 trillion a year of physical stuff a year. We get some value out of it, and then we throw it away. And the entropy of that stuff that goes to the landfill is way lower than most of the rest of the universe. Like, we've already refined so much that stuff that's going to landfill. Plastic, e-waste, concrete from wrecked buildings. Like, shame on us as humanity if we can't find a way to make the world much more circular. We shouldn't have to dig up more minerals at this point. There's plenty in landfill. So finding a way to turn our trash back to treasure using mechanical, chemical, biologic, heat kinds of processes, that's a moonshot we're excited about and we're making some progress on. So we're going to let Google be Google, and we're going to go find some very different things to work on.
Have you done any work on, and I had to go look the name of this up. I knew the concept, but I had to go look it up to find the name for it, Jevons paradox. This is the economist in England in the early 1800s when he's looking at the steam engine, and which is this huge step forward in fuel efficiency. And yet the case that he makes is that with very vast growth in fuel efficiency, that at the macro level, fuel usage actually went way up. Our intuition is that if you increase the efficiency of something, then the use of that thing is going to go down. But he's saying, no, actually, if you look at the studies, it goes up. And from what I understand, this has been shown to be true in ongoing decades. As we increasingly get efficient, then our use continues to rise, and we're using more of it, even though we're more efficient at it. And I'm wondering, has that kind of paradox been something that you all have happened to look at as you're concerned with so much about energy and energy consumption and efficiency? Has that been something that's crossed your radar as a problem that you all might work on?
Part of our job is to think about the unintended consequences of the things that we do. We can't control all aspects of them, but it's certainly our job as technologists and as moonshot makers to think about those things as much as we can to get things out in the world early and test so we can discover those unintended consequences. But for example, one of our moonshots right now is a moonshot for helping the electric grid, helping the grid operators of the world manage what they have better, plan for the future better, and ultimately be able to orchestrate their grids and make them into what I think the grid really wants to be when it grows up, which is a real-time marketplace for electrons. And that's just not possible today. That's not the fault of the grid operators, but the way it's grown up over the last 120 some years and how it's been cobbled together. This is one of the world's oldest machines, certainly the oldest one still operating. It's the world's largest machine. It's the world's most complex machine. People don't really know where all of it is in detail, and it makes it very hard to manage. And so our moonshot, to help them understand what they have and be able to sort of like get their arms around it so that they can simulate where it will be in the future, that isn't avoiding Jevons paradox, but I don't think it's making it worse. It is building a muscle that will help us deal with whatever the future brings our way.
I would assume, obviously, you have great hopes for AI and the possibilities of AI. So maybe point to what are you hopeful about in that regard? How would you summarize your hopes in that regard? And then what are your concerns or hesitancies in that regard?
First of all, this is very close to our hearts. Google Brain, which is, one of the kind of epicenters of the explosion of machine learning over the last 15 years. That's caused the foundation moment. In fact, the transformer, the T in ChatGPT, came from Google Brain, came from X originally. So this is very much on our minds. I think that humanity has done a lot of work to create a lever for our bodies over many thousands of years. Things are like literally levers, pulleys, etc., fire, and then ultimately combustion engines, things like that, where we could, for every calorie we output, we could have thousands of calories put at our disposal, which allows for us to dig a hole in the ground much better than just using like shovels. In the same way, I think computers are and are becoming ever more so levers for our minds. And I appreciate the ways that can feel disruptive. I think we maybe forget the ways in which people used to define themselves by their physical strength and how scary that was maybe for some of them to have that no longer be an appropriate way for them to define themselves. The John Henry story of somebody fighting against the machine to prove that he was stronger, winning, and then dying at the end of that contest is I think apocryphal, but it's a very memorable story about that tension. And I believe as long as we're hanging on so tightly to this need for humans to be special, the same way we got upset when Copernicus and Ptolemy before him pointed out that humans weren't literally in the center of the universe and everyone got upset, that was us giving up a piece of our specialness. Finding out that humans are descended from primates and how upset people got, it doesn't matter unless you had defined your specialness around we're not just part of the rest of the natural order. I think the most upsetting thing for people, though this is not normally how it gets talked about, is that we at some level want to be special, and having lost almost all of our other excuses for specialness, we're better than the stars, we're better than the bunny rabbits. And the reason we are is because we can think, because we maybe have a first-person experience of the world. As computers start to do things that look more and more like the thinking that we do, I think ultimately they will be a great part of humanity. I think we're going to have to give up another piece of our presumed specialness. And to the extent we can just be happy being humans and enjoy our humanness, I think there will be a lot of prosperity that's driven by artificial intelligence. I think the really scary bit is this issue of specialness that's going to be complicated for people to sort of move to a new way of thinking about the meaning of life and about how to live a meaningful life. But you know what? Chess is a solved problem. Computers can beat everybody, every human on Earth, hands down. That's been true for decades. People still play chess and they still enjoy it. So it's okay.
How would you see that story going wrong? That is, what sorts of possibilities in that unfolding story would you deem unacceptable or a direction you wouldn't want to see it all go?
Well, I mean, back in 1997, I published a book on this exact subject called Exegesis. It's a story about graduate student at Stanford named Alice and a web spider, think of it as an LLM of today, that becomes self-aware. It's a metaphor, from my perspective, about how humanity and technology are building a relationship. And if we approach that relationship with suspicion and fear, that relationship is going to go a lot less well. I think it is one of the fundamental things about being human and about relationships. And so just like with you, if I approach you with fear and suspicion, it will create a negative feedback cycle in our ability to get along together. I certainly hope that humanity can find a way to build a relationship with technology that is based on, not blind optimism, but on positivity and hopefulness and openness, because the activity of being fearful and suspicious, even paranoid, those are not neutral actions. They create their own futures. So I very much hope we don't, as a species, go down that path with technology.
I'm talking to Astro Teller, the captain of moonshots at Google X Moonshot Factory. If you'd like to hear more about Astro's work at the Moonshot Factory, check out his new podcast, the Moonshot Podcast, which explores real stories behind audacious innovation. Astro, thank you. You've given us so much to think about. Grateful for your time, grateful for your work.
Absolutely my pleasure.
Today, we start a new segment on the show, just one small closing take, in which first I'll reflect upon some matters I would want to discuss more if time allowed, and second, some particularly helpful practices for a pursuit of a good life. First, some things I would have liked to have explored more. Astro and I had a remarkable conversation about the meaning of life. You'll remember that he discussed how when he was a boy, he was struggling with some acute anxiety prior to a soccer game. And then it occurred to him, it's just a game, and that this, in turn, had become an epiphany for the meaning of life, that it's just a game. There is no meaning in life, he said, except the meaning with which we imbue life. As someone who's dealt with a great deal of anxiety as a boy and as an adult, I'm always eager to explore any sort of new possible strategy or technique that will help me deal with my anxiety. But I wonder whether or not in the long run this approach might create more anxiety for me rather than less. And the fact that there are things that I am willing to do in games that I would not want to be willing to do in any so-called sort of real life. This relates to a second question, the conversation that we had about the specialness of humankind. Astro's quite right, I think, that there have been many in Western civilization who have rejected certain scientific discoveries because of an ill-informed notion of human specialness, rejecting, for example, the theory of evolution. And yet at the same time, this notion of the specialness of humankind and the theological doctrine that humankind was created in God's image gave us the philosophical framework from which we developed the whole notion of human rights. That is, the specialness of humankind allowed us to say that one human cannot vaunt themselves above another, that we are all equal, one before the other. There were numerous things in our conversation with Astro that I found so very helpful in this notion of pursuing a good life. First, the willingness to fail and fail spectacularly as we seek solutions to problems. This is a particular challenge to me as a recovering perfectionist. And we academics are infamously known for the ways we cover ourselves with our footnotes and our endless nuance. But here the idea is, just try something and be willing to fail in public and fail quickly. Another way, in my mind, to describe this is the fruitfulness of vulnerability that can allow us more quickly to discover ways we are wrong, which is not to take ourselves too seriously, which is yet another way of describing humility. Finally, simply his call to dare be so audacious as to dream formerly undreamt possibilities for the sake of the world's most pressing needs. Surely a central practice for exploring what it might mean to live a good life. That's just one small take on today's episode.
Well, the man who invented that old steam drill, he thought it was mighty fine. John Henry drove it down 15 feet while steam drill only made it 9. Lord, Lord, steam drill only made it 9.
You've been listening to No Small Endeavor and our interview with entrepreneur and inventor Astro Teller. You're hearing currently my rendition of the classic American folk song, The Legend of John Henry, which Astro mentioned in our interview, the story of a steel-driving railroad worker who defeats a steam-powered drill in a battle of strength, only to die of exhaustion with a hammer in his hand. We recorded this version at the Sound Emporium back in 2022 with an all-star band comprising Brian Sutton, Missy Raines, Wes Corbett, Becky Bueller, and Stephen Mogen. Our live engineer was Joe Trinicosti, mixed by Ross Collier. We gratefully acknowledge the support of Lilly Endowment Incorporated, a private philanthropic foundation supporting the causes of community development, education, and religion. Our thanks to all the stellar team that makes this show possible: Christy Bragg, Jacob Lewis, Carriet Harmon, Jason Sheasley, Sophie Byard, Kate Hayes, Mary Evelyn Brown, and Audrey Griffith. Our theme song was composed by Tim Lauer. Thanks for listening, and let's keep exploring what it means to live a good life together. No Small Endeavor is a production of PRX, Tokens Media LLC, and
Great Feeling Studio.